Kia ora koutou, this is the Headbutt Messiah TK Cooper, one half of the absolute best in men's combat double Sunshine Machine, and you are listening on Twitch, on YouTube to CCP Podcast.
What is happening, friends of CCP Podcasting? Welcome back to Beyond the Bell. I am Chris Page. I am usually joined by none other than John Cable. However, John is on a lengthy vacation. I have called overseas today and tagged in, gave the hot tag to none other than the sexiest man in the Netherlands. He's just a sexy goth.
Sexy goth.
Welcome to your first Beyond the Bell, brother. How are you?
It feels like I've busted my cherry once again. Something new, and I'm excited to do this. It feels like it's been so long time coming, and I'm excited for this.
Yeah, don't fuck it up, buddy. That's all you got to do. Just don't fuck it up.
I'll try.
Our guest today, this is an interesting little turnabout. And it's all coincidental, but to me, I don't believe in coincidences. I think things happen for a reason, and I think you intersect in your lives for a reason. So our guest today, literally a couple of weeks ago, we were filming a Down the Rabbit Hole on a company in France, and you found the company, you pulled the show, and when we do those programs, we don't know what we're watching. We don't have any context. We just pull random matches from the YouTube and go, right? Our guest today came from that. And what makes this funny to me is, like, legitimately an hour, maybe two, after we went off the air on Twitch, you sent me a DM on Discord, and you were so excited. You said that our guest had hit you up, had brought up, seeing us do some stuff with Nelson at a Portugal WrestleFest. And I said, that's interesting, because remember, we just watched a show, and he was on it, and his transition game was fucking fire. Let's get to our guest, and we're going to talk about all this as we get situated and get moving. Welcoming in our first Beyond the Bill guest from France. We've got the man Zaeken is here with us. How are you, sir? How are you?
Gentlemen, thank you for having me. Pretty happy to be here.
No, we're ecstatic, bro.
Thank you.
Anytime that we can sit down and talk to guys that are in the business currently, it's always a good day, especially when we're looking at a country that we haven't done a whole lot of coverage of just yet, and how all this came together. Like, I think it's a beautiful thing. I cannot believe the same day that we watched our first match with you attached to it, Goth gets a DM. And walk me through how all that came about on your side of the equation, Zaeken.
Well, I've been friends with Nelson Pereira for like the longest time. Like we've known each other ever since we were teenagers, like way before we started wrestling. And despite the fact that he's from Portugal, he's also from Switzerland. Like half of his family is there. And so he spoke French perfectly, and we were probably like 13 years old. Like we met on a message board, started talking back and forth, and long story short, like we became wrestlers like a few years after that. And so he's been following what everything I do, and I'm following everything he does. So I came across like the show that you guys did together, and so out of curiosity, I just sent a quick DM, saying, it's funny you're doing all those shows about different countries and what's going on in Europe. Well, if you're interested in talking about French wrestling, I'm your guy. And so literally the first answer that I got was like, well, we just watched you maybe like an hour and a half ago. So, great minds think alike, I guess.
It's fantastic. We say on our channel that professional wrestling brings people together. It definitely can, and it has the ability to, if you allow it, if you can get past all the tribalism and all the bullshit that comes along with it and see it for what it is. It truly can bring people together, and this is a perfect story of that. Goth is the individual you sent the message to. Goth, why don't you welcome Zaeken to the show, because I know that you're excited.
I'm really excited. It's just been like as if it's been 48 hours ago or something that we contacted each other about what we are about and the show that we have done with Nelson and what we could do in the near future. And I didn't think that it would come this quickly, and just as if it was meant to be. And I'm really excited. First time that I'm doing this, so bear with me. But I'm really happy to have you on the show and to pick your brains about everything about pro wrestling and how you experienced everything that since you became a fan of it.
Well,
I'm very happy to talk about all this because I think that inside that European scene, France is a little bit like it's in a weird place historically and culturally. So, an interesting discussion.
well, we're gonna dive right in. Goth, you don't worry about it, brother. That's why this is a taped show.
Oh no!
If you fuck it up, I can fix it. But we go into the French world of professional wrestling. How did your career start? When did I know you grew up with Nelson. Nelson is a great friend of the channel. I love that guy, and I love everything that he's touched over there in Portugal because he's really, really fucking making a mark for the business. When did you fall in love with wrestling? What's that look like for you?
It was very odd. Like it happened in the 2000s, and one of the things that I say most of the time is that back in those days, 50% of the French population had no idea what wrestling was, like literally, and the other 50% kind of knew what it was, but didn't like it. Like it was not a popular thing. Like you were not one of the cool kids if you liked wrestling back in those days. And because of this, like it was not a great TV product. Essentially, there was only one TV channel that would broadcast pro wrestling, and it was not even like a free TV channel. You needed to have some kind of like special cable arrangement.
Sure.
And the only thing you would see would be like a 40-minute long version of Raw, 7 weeks behind the American time. So if you had like a Monday Night Raw from like July 1st, you would see it in France at the end of like August. That was literally the only thing that was there. So I don't know why, but one day my family decided to go to bed early, and middle class family, so we only had one TV in the house. And for once, I was allowed to basically be in front of the TV by myself, and I just went, flipped through channels and came across this, and love at first sight, I guess. I just understood that it was going to be my thing, which is always a good sign when you discover something and nobody introduces you to it, and you just like it. You know that this is your thing, pretty much. So that's how it started for me. And at the time, it was like 2005, so the internet was barely a thing in France. Like it has been around, but it was not a thing that everybody could get their hands on. Especially like lower middle class families like me. So we just got a computer back in those days, and I used this crazy thing we call the internet, and look for info, as much info as humanly possible, and that's how it started, basically.
Well, who was on the TV? Do you remember when you cut it on and you were like, "Oh, I mean, because I'm kind of the same way. My earliest memories of, and this is gonna date myself. My earliest memories of wrestling was sitting down with my great grandmother, on a Saturday or a Sunday morning, watching old school NWA and watching the Horsemen lay a beating on dusty roads. Like those were my earliest memories of sitting down and watching wrestling. So that's what I fell in love with. Do you remember like what was happening in the scene that you just took your attention? Because again, suspension of disbelief, it grabs you, and once you get sucked in by it, like you just said it yourself, this is it. This is what you want to do. So who was it that sucked you in?
It's kind of fuzzy in my brain because like I remember watching the TV but automatically getting on the computer. Like it was in the middle of like summer vacation, so I basically stayed up all night on my computer. So I had like probably a million images going at once that night. But I think the one thing I remember is that there was a match with like Hogan and Michaels and someone, and they were facing Christian and Tomko, and it was right around the time that Hogan made a comeback and Shawn Michaels like betrayed him automatically.
SummerSlam.
And they had this weird, they had this weird goofy match at SummerSlam for some reason. So I do remember this, But I do remember the one thing that really made me like it was the fact that back in those days YouTube was barely starting and it was pretty shitty, to be honest. But I remember going on WWE.com and there was a lot of clips from the matches. Most of the time it was like the end of the match.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like Paul London and Rey Mysterio and Gregory Helms.
Yep.
And these are the things that I remember like the most. Tajiri, all those guys.
Got you. Yeah. No. See, like I feel you on that because it seems like the names that you just pulled, the Mysterios, the cruiserweights, if you will, the Flyers. Those are the ones that, in my opinion, kind of took the business to a whole nother level back in the Attitude Era and into the early 2000s. Like those were the guys that, really, really shaped the face of what we see nowadays. When you fall in love with wrestling, Goth, you feel free to jump in at any point in time. I'll ask this question, or I'll sling it around to you in just 1 second if that's what you prefer. When you started looking into really getting into training, what did that look like in your scene? Was it something that you were able to pull up and Google out, or were the training centers very few and far between? What's the scene look like trying to break in for you?
It was really hard. It was really complicated back in those days. I didn't know it at the time, but essentially, like wrestling, there was only like two main promotions back in those days, right? There was essentially this one promotion that was like a kind of old school promotion that was basically started by guys who had been students of like the golden era wrestlers. Because wrestling was really big in France in like the 60s. It was like the number one sport. But it completely fell apart in the 70s and 80s. And so throughout the 90s and early 2000s, there were only a handful of guys who were students of those old school wrestlers who had a promotion kind of. And it was very cliche. It was very like WWF early 80s type stuff. And the other guys were basically this promotion called ICWA. And ICWA is essentially the company that brought French wrestling into the 21st century. Like, they were the guys that basically, you could see that they were watching SmackDown and they were watching some Ring of Honor here and there. And it's like, basically, it's a promotion that brought Chris Hero and Bryan Danielson in France, like in the early 2000s. So the only problem is that they were all in the north. And I'm from the south. I'm from the deep south, like close to the Spanish border. So they were literally working up north. They had connections, I think, with WXW in Germany or something like this. But it was super far away from where I lived. There was nothing. The good thing is that I tend to be very obsessive and compulsive with things that I enjoy. So I was when I discovered wrestling, it wasn't just, I'm going to go on WWE.com and see what happens. No, I had to get my hands on anything. So I started like downloading pretty much everything you can imagine, from like the weirdest like Mexican indie shows to like some old school old Japan to everything I could. And that geek aspect of me made me discover European wrestling, and I started to get as much info as I could on wrestling schools. So luckily, I found like a place that I just opened, probably like 30 miles away from home, and it was a guy who basically had some kind of agreement with ICWA, like the new guys from the north. So I was like, oh, great, that's awesome. Like I get there.
That's a way
I'll try
in.
to get something.
Foot in the door.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a way in. That's better than nothing, right? And
Sure.
I was not afraid of the fact that it was not a big thing, because like when you're a wrestling fan, you can be like delusional, like you watch WWE and you think that this is everything. But before that, I had just discovered PWG, like back in those days, and like early PWG, like 2005 PWG, and I loved it. And I was like, I want to wrestle in small arenas. I would enjoy it perfectly. So I joined that school, and that's how I basically got started in a way.
That's amazing. When you started to do training and slowly working towards wrestling matches, because I can imagine that you had to take a while before you can actually go into your first professional match. Which wrestler did you identify the most with?
Oh, it was funny because again, back in those days, it was very like WWE oriented. So all the guys that I started training with, all they thought about was Batista or guys like these, you know. And at the time, I had become completely obsessed with the business. So I was spending all my days on the internet looking for everything that I could get my hands on. And so I always liked the cruiserweights. I always liked Ray. And for some reason, I discovered Ultimo Dragon and Dragon
Oh,
Gate.
oh,
Yeah.
buddy.
Yes,
Oh, you're
yes.
speaking my language, bro.
And so that became my thing, sort of. And so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have a mask, and I'm gonna wrestle like this weird Japanese Mexican style, and it's gonna be like awesome. But the funniest thing is that it completely clashed with, well, number one, the other students because they didn't get it at all, but it also clashed with the coach we had. And because, like, let's be honest, the guy who ran that school, like in the South, he was like probably the worst person ever to run a wrestling school, like completely zero knowledge about wrestling, really was looking to get money from young guys like me, like as much money as humanly possible. But the one thing that we were lucky about is that of all the people he brought to kind of train us, one of them happened to be Saraya Knight from the Knight family
Okay.
in the UK.
Yep.
Whoa.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I was kind of lucky because even though she was definitely not a Japanese style wrestler or a Mexican style wrestler, she was very interested in someone who wanted to learn. And she was like, okay, well, if you want something different from the American stuff, I can show you. I can show you a ton of different stuff from that. So essentially, the way I train was basically like Zack Saber Jr. before Zack Saber Jr. in a way. That's how I ended up
Oh,
starting.
wow.
So what my style became, and I was very awkward like back then. I was a decent athlete, but I wasn't tough. Like, you know, I wasn't like muscular or anything. So I ended up doing this weird like British style with mixed with a tiny bit of high flying from time to time, and that became my strange wrestling style at the beginning. So yeah, originally it was more like Dragon Gate, but it switched to more like technical wrestling.
That's fantastic. See, I'm a diehard fan of the technical style. Before we get
Yeah.
there, when you were coming in and you were actually starting to get into the grind of the training, what were some of the, what was your hardest thing to grasp? Like, for me initially it was like footwork. It took me a minute to get my footwork down, but
Mm.
once I got it down, I was good. I was always had decent cardio, so I was always good at running the ropes and I was a flare guy growing up, so I did a lot of stairmastering. So I
Mm.
kept myself in shape. But what were some of the tough spots or the tougher things for you to kind of grasp initially when you got into things?
To me, it was like getting tougher overall.
Sure.
Because like contact, I was not afraid of it. Like I had been like a soccer goalkeeper early on, so I was always like in a lot of contact sports. I played a little bit of rugby or a little bit of European handball, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that taking bump after bump after bump really changes like the way you do stuff. And I was like, as I like to say, I was like tender meat when I
Mm-hmm.
started. Like I was not ready for all this.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that Soraya, she took a liking to us. Like of all the people she trained, she probably trained over 1,000 people. She took a liking to our group because I think she understood that the guy running the school was like a joke, but we were very dedicated, so she liked us. And her plan was basically, okay, I cannot train you every week like it would be the case for like a normal wrestling school. But what I can do is that I can get to the school once a month, and we will try to get as much work as humanly possible in like 3 days, basically. So she would come in and we would train 3 days straight. And it would be like literally like from Friday to Sunday, 27 hours of wrestling in like 3 days. So originally I was like, holy shit, like this is impossible to manage. Like I'm really like I can barely walk at the end of those things. And she basically told me that's gonna be like a great example of what the business is. Because when you're on the road and you're wrestling like 10 matches in like 5 days, this is what it's gonna feel like. So you better get used to it. So that was the tough spot for me.
It can chew you up. and it can spit you out
Yeah.
real quick. I get it. I remember the first day we ran ropes. I think we were 3 or 4 days in. I went home with welts on my back that were there for weeks. So that's the piece of the business that nobody really sees. Like that's one of those. Everyone says, "Oh, I
Yeah.
can do that." Yeah, okay. Go through 90 days of fucking training, and then come back and talk to me. Tell me if you can do it. It's one of those situations.
Exactly.
So I 100% get it. And the fact that you're able to get some learning tree time with Saraya is incredible.
Yeah.
Who else were some of those inspirations on the French scene when you were breaking in, and as you were in training, and as you were trying to get through all that? Who were some of the guys that were on the scene over there that you were paying attention to, and that were helping you out along the way outside of Saraya?
Well, the very strange thing is that since that school opened in the deep south, there was really no French wrestlers around. There was only like the group of guys that was getting started. So there was just a bunch of beginners together trying to make sense out of it. But I had noticed like two people, like again, like there were some indie wrestlers in the north, but like they were local guys, and like there was nothing really special, to be frank. But the one guy that everybody was paying attention to was a guy called Tom La Ruffa, who ended up being like Sylvester Lefort in NXT.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was going crazy over that guy because he basically said out loud, like on his blog at the time, very 2006, that he was going to Canada to train with Lance Storm, which was unheard of.
Wow.
Like nobody did that back then, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so there was this guy and the other guy that I kind of discovered around that time. And it's funny because now he's a dear friend of mine. And when he comes back to France, he lives like near me actually. Is a guy called Eddie Karawi. And he's basically was an amateur wrestler, a very good one on top of that. And he went to Japan and literally found Inoki, like
Oh
knocked on the
wow.
door of the dojo. Yeah.
Whoa.
So there was nobody really of quality in the country, but there was those two guys that decided to travel the world. And so there was that, and there was also later on, as we kept on training, there were some old school French wrestlers, like from like the golden years, like 1960s, 1970s,
Mhm.
who showed up from time to time during practice. Because they were from Paris originally, but like most people who retire, they decided to go to the south because it's more interesting. You live like in the sunshine, so more enjoyable. So they would show up, and so guys like Jean Corn or Claude Roca, they would show up, and that was very interesting because it was like guys who literally were on national television back in those days. Which is something we never heard of. Because for us, wrestling was this thing for nerds that once you get in it, nobody gets it and nobody likes it. And we met those guys who were like 65 years old and who basically told us those stories about, that wrestling was being watched by millions of people, So that's the only exposure we had to French wrestling was those guys, the old timers.
That's
Goth, what do you got?
amazing. I was about to say is that I'm feel so similar to what you're saying about how wrestling, you either get it or you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm from the Netherlands, and luckily I found like two organizations in the Netherlands that are doing great shows. Dutch Pro Wrestling in Holland. I forgot the name, but my bad. Pro Wrestling Holland, and they're doing great shows. But I'm like all nearly 50, and back then it was all that you knew about pro wrestling was WWF at that time, and
Yeah.
I was pulled in by a cousin of mine, and I got magazines and stuff like that, and people either said you're cool or you're a nerd. They
First
didn't
of
get it.
all,
And,
anybody who says
so,
that you're a nerd for watching wrestling can fuck off.
you know, well,
That's all
they
there is
don't
to
just
it.
don't understand. They just
That's
don't understand. But but it's so funny interesting to hear that you got like. I wanted to ask about La Ruffa because we watched also a match from him on that
Fantastic.
show, and we also watched a match from him last night from the Romanian Pro Wrestling. How is it like to pick somebody's brain like a Tom La Ruffa or those who were back then big names that did something that you are currently doing?
It's interesting because it's, well, first off, as a younger wrestler than him, it's funny because I talked about this to him like probably 2 months ago. But like, it's funny. I used to read your blog like back in those days when you were going there, and now we're in the same locker room. Like, it's the weirdest like thing ever, right? It's interesting to pick his brain, just like it is interesting to pick other guys' brain, because you realize that everybody's gonna have a different definition of what pro wrestling is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that I always like complain about, is that the golden rules of wrestling, you realize that they're very different from one person to another. So I'm very happy when I pick Tom's brains, because like I can learn something, and then I will talk to Karawi, and I will learn something that might be a little different, but it also might be useful, you know. And then I might talk to some guy from Mexico, and he's going to tell me something completely different. And now it's up to me to make sense of it and also use it whenever it's useful. So that's what I say to the young guys. I say pick people's brain all the time, but never think that you have to do this. You know, understand what it is, understand the context, and then create your own version of it. You know, that's how it will work.
I completely see that. I used to tell, well, I still tell people, so the younger guys that we talk to that pop on the shows, like, don't think that education stops. It's like
Yeah.
with any profession, you learn every day, and if the tools are there, and in this case, tools being those who have traveled, who have left the country, who've done international tours, those are your tools. Yeah,
Yeah.
utilize them. And even with training, like I was talking to this, I feel like this kid's a young prodigy over here, and I think he's going to be something really special in the next 5 to 6 years. I was telling him, like, just because you've gone through this school doesn't mean that you can't go to other schools. Doesn't mean that you can't go
Exactly. Yeah.
learn from other people. What were some of the best things that, or the biggest pieces of information that you have learned, maybe from someone else in the business, while you were said picking a brain?
Well, Saraya was the best trainer possible, and of course, you know, at the time, I didn't realize how lucky I was to have found someone like this. And again, going back to like the super like independent wrestling nerd that I was, it was funny because I think a part of that, a part of my success, if you can call that success, is that of all the guys that were training back then, I'm probably the only one who kept on going very long and had some success internationally. And I think that a part of it is thanks to the fact that I was always studying the people that were around us, because you know most of the time when you have a trainer, the guys are just like, oh, okay, yeah, that's the coach, you know, but they don't care about their careers or they don't pick their brains and they're not interested. They're just like, okay, we're gonna learn wrestling and we're gonna do it with that person. It's like, no, might as well learn about, you know, what they did and what they, you know, what their career is about. And so Saraya was a great coach for that. And the best piece of advice she probably gave me is that uh, always make sure that the shit you do looks credible. What she meant is that don't do something like, you know, MMA style all the time, but like make them at least believe that it could hurt.
Mm-hmm.
You know, don't think about too much about does this look good or is it like perfect or is it exactly what they saw on TV? Make it look like you could kick someone's ass. Like, and I always keep that in mind is that I think Jim Cornette had some kind of like phrase that says, and I think he got it from Jerry Jarrett when he say you cannot make people believe that wrestling is real, but you can make them believe that you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the best advice I ever got. Is that sure? Everybody knows that wrestling is a work, sure, but make them believe that if they go too far, you could literally kill someone because you're that capable. And I think that's what I always do. I always try to keep it like legit in that aspect, so they can always have some bit of respect for what we do.
I used to always say something very similar to that. Just because everybody knows that there's the business of wrestling is a business doesn't mean they have to be smart to your business. So like,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? Like it's just it's so similar, and I can appreciate that mentality. Once you got out of training, man, what did your first match look like? What were the feelings when you got your first booking?
It's a funny story because like every wrestler will tell you, oh, when I started it was really complicated, like we wrestled in front of like 5 people and stuff. Well, I can tell you my first match literally was in front of like 2 people. It was literally my first match.
Yep,
So
I've been there.
because like the place we trained at was a nightmare. It was like basically like it was supposed to become like an airport terminal, but it never got finished. So it was this empty warehouse in the middle of nowhere, and we basically trained there. And one day, the guy who ran this place decided that it was going to be a good idea to run a show there, which was like the worst idea possible, right? And so only 2 people showed up, and we literally had to wrestle in front of like 2 people in an empty ass building. And so it was everything but the glamorous. It was like probably like the most miserable thing ever. And then we moved on to um, like small shows in like tourist resorts for some reason. Like the guy struck a deal, I guess, with someone there.
Hmm.
And so we started wrestling in front of like tourists and like public squares, like everything you can imagine when you think about local regional wrestling.
At what point in time did you really feel like that you were starting to gain some momentum? And what I mean by that is like, I know, like, I can only base it off of my experiences. Like, I didn't build confidence immediately. Like, it took me a year and a half to 2 years to where I really felt like I was comfortable with what I was doing. At what point did it, when I say that, did it click for you? And that you knew that you're kind of onto something, and that you have the ability to get this done?
Oh, it took a lot of time. It took a lot of time, especially because back then, like when we started, we had a good coach, but we had no idea what we were doing once that coach was gone. Because of course, the guy who ran the place like got into an argument with Saraya, and she basically had to leave, but she had all the right reasons basically to leave. So we were on our own, and so for like 2 or 3 years, we were completely lost. I had no idea what to do. And by that time, I had become like a college student, so I had a lot of things to take care of, like personally.
Mm-hmm.
And we kept on training. Like we tried to find a place in a different town where we could train, but there was nothing too great about it. And what made it for me is that once I finished my bachelor's degree, I moved to a different town for a lot of reasons, but basically like the university I was in like was going through a lot of problems. So I decided to enroll in a different city, and I went west, basically to the city of Bordeaux, which is like on the west coast.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they make all the French wine, essentially. That's over there. And over there, like there were some good wrestling schools, and I'm talking about like some that even have like international guys come in. So I was interested, right?
Sure.
So I went there, and it was like 2015, something like this. So it was already 7 years after I got started. So there has been a bit of a pause, like for a few years, and I needed to get back in the game because I was only like 21, so I thought I still had a shot. I started very early. I started like when I was 15. So I went to Bordeaux, and I went to FRPW, which was like the big promotion there. And the guys running the school told me, okay, we know you a little bit because of the person who trained you, but we need to make sure that you are still, that you still got it. So we're gonna not retrain you, but we're gonna put you through everything we put our students through. So I had like 6 months of like basically updating my stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and then they put me on shows in 2016, and they ran that promotion so well, and the school was so professional, and everything was just so nice that I ended up like understanding what an actual show was, what an actual school was, the way you should wrestle, the way you should prepare a match. And I was in the ring with people who had experience, like legit experience, not just other students. And that's when it happened. Like as soon as I got to FRPW, that's when it clicked. And I was like, okay, now I know what I need to do. I know what I need to work on. Oops, sorry. And I know exactly what it's going to take, basically, for me to make it to the next level. And after I got to FRPW, I started to get more bookings.
I mean, resume speaks, brother. You know, people
Exactly.
know. I tell people always, people can see through fake, and they can see through. And that includes, you know, even with the levels of training that you can get through when it comes to professional wrestling. See, you said to 2016, so now I want to ask you a question that is totally unrelated to fucking anything that we're talking about, but it made me think about it when you said 2016. COVID, like, what you were on if you're starting to get bookings in 2016, man, you know that's what 2020. So not even 3 years later, you're probably building momentum at this time. What does COVID look like for you guys, and how did that affect the scene overall in France?
Well, most of the scene was like hurting, obviously, because of all the things that were going on and the fact that you couldn't have public events anymore. But to be honest, like personally, it was like a blessing in disguise for me because I was very busy and I was maybe too busy. Like I had a job that was taking a little bit of time. I was training people at this time because at that point I already had like probably like 8 years of experience. So I had started training young guys, and I was, as you say in English, I was like spreading myself thin, and it was very hard to take care of everything at once, right? And so COVID happened, and I was like, okay, this is going to be the great reset. Like, I'm going to have the opportunity to just stop and think about what I'm doing. So by that time, I had gained a lot of weight because I gain weight very easily, like all the time. So I was like, you're going to have enough time to go on a diet, to get a different job, to get a different apartment. By that time, I had gone back to my hometown of Montpellier. So I was like, you can basically make things right, like the way you want, at least.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a pretty good thing, actually. It took a little bit of time for the wrestling companies to get back on their feet. Nobody folded, actually. No major promotion folded.
Wow,
that's good to hear.
Because of COVID. But I think it has a lot to do with the structure of wrestling promotions in France. Most of the time, including in the US, when you open a wrestling promotion, it's a business, right?
Mm-hmm.
You open it the way you would open a store or something. In France, we have this thing called the 1901 law, which is an old school thing that exists in France. And it's basically a way for you to create like some kind of like institution that is like technically non-profit. So you can make money off of it, but you should never make profit. So every time you make money, you should invest it in something. So it's a great way to create like some kind of like basketball team or video games club or theater company or whatever without having to go through all the paperwork that you would normally go to when you open a business. So the reason why no wrestling promotions folded after COVID is because, well, they were non-profits. So there was no real losses. There were no taxes on them either. So
that's interesting.
yeah, so that allowed everybody to get back on their feet as soon as COVID ended, basically.
That's smart. Yeah. that's
Yeah.
There wasn't much of a, and then of course when you come back from COVID, of course everybody's been cramped up for a year, so I would imagine that audience sizes were massively increased. Well, maybe not massively, but were increased over maybe what they once were, coming right out of that pandemic.
Yeah, and there was also, I think, like right before COVID, pro wrestling in France, like the indie circuit, had started to get a bit of momentum because I think it came from what happened in the UK, right, with Progress and Ref Pro and all those guys, Fight Club Pro. Like all of a sudden, like European indie wrestling became cool, for some reason with WXW and all those people. And so I think that in France, a lot of like WWE fans started to realize that, okay, the wrestlers we have here can actually be cool as well. So they started attending the shows. So COVID happened, and when it ended, yeah, all of a sudden there was like a wrestling, like a French wrestling community. All of a sudden, so we started to get a little bit more attention than we used to. So that was great. That was really enjoyable.
I
Yes.
can imagine that it was so excited to go back to wrestling again after a long period of time that you, yeah, almost being quarantined. I mean, I've experienced it as a human being. Luckily, I had my dog, so I was allowed to go outside to walk your dog. That so far that's far in the Netherlands that you could only go outside for various small reasons, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, I know that it drove some people over here insane, but I'm glad for some that it gave you some positive outcome on how
Yeah.
uh, to consider how you going to do things, and like you're saying, losing your weight. Um, was it also a period of time that you were thinking about something like promo work? Because I've known that Paige and John did interviews with friends from Australia, where they were talking about in Riot City Wrestling about how they had a promo school. Was that something that you've been doing during that period of time, or is that something that you've also been doing during the wrestling school lessons?
It's funny because like promos, they're not very a big thing in France for some reason. Like
Okay.
very strangely enough, French people are very self-conscious about speaking in public. I don't know why, but it's not really a thing that they enjoy, and none of them really speak English. Like it's very rare to find like a French person who speaks good English, and it was always my thing, mostly because of wrestling. So I pretty much de facto became like a great promo guy by French standards because I was the only one who had the audacity to do it, basically. So if you go to my YouTube channel, there's literally a lot of promos in French and English, and it's like, okay, I guess it gives me an advantage over the guys, over the rest of the scene. But I don't know why. For some reason, yeah, French wrestlers are not very big in doing promos.
I'm always a bigger
Were you
fan of the proof is in the pudding. Like, don't get me wrong, I was a pretty good talker. I was a heel, and I always thrived on pissing off the audience. But I realized that back in my day, like, that's more of a big fish, small pond scenario, right? Like, 'cause, I mean, we're going back to the '90s, right? The late '90s into the 2000s. So it's not a big thing to toot your horn about. But those that didn't talk and who maybe didn't cut promos, like the proof was in the work, and the proof comes from the audience, and the audience
Mm-hmm.
reacts. Like, my deal was, did I get a reaction? Yes. Did my opponent get a reaction? Yes. Did the match get a reaction? Yes. Fuck it, man. We just won. We just won the game.
Exactly.
If we all got ourselves in a position to get the reaction we wanted, we win. That's it. Uh, what were some of your finer moments thus far throughout your career? Because you've been in it a hot minute now, and now obviously coming out of COVID, business is booming everywhere. What are some
Yeah.
of the bigger moments of your career thus far that you're very proud of? It doesn't have to be a championship. It could be anything from a hell of a match that you've had, or learning a lesson, or teaching someone. What are some of you look back on your careers thus far as a wrestler? Give me your
It's
moments.
it's funny because like one of them happened very recently. Um, because I'm from the South and because I'm not like into a big wrestling market, I understood the importance of traveling like early on. I
Mm-hmm.
realized that you need to get your name out there and nobody's going to help you doing this. You need to do this on your own. And so I traveled and I got my name in different countries. Just the simple fact that I wrestled in like 7 countries is surreal to me.
Mm-hmm.
Completely surreal. Like you would have told me this like 15 years ago, I would have never believed you. Like never. So doing this was great. The pinnacle, I would say, of this, this like globetrotting experience was Mexico. having wrestled there was completely unreal. Like to have wrestled for the number 3 company in Mexico in a packed house was like completely insane by far. IWRG in Mexico City, they're just like, I mean, they're the place where basically like most of like the all the Japanese guys that went on the excursion in Mexico, they went there. Like literally, Ultimo Dragon owns a building next to the arena, like that kind of stuff. You know,
Whoa.
that's surreal when you go to places like these. And one of my proudest accomplishments was like, I would say 2 months ago, I got this message from a company in England called Premier Promotions. And Premier Promotions is basically one of the oldest wrestling organizations in England, and they still do the traditional like British rounds match when you go 2 out of 3 falls, like 12 rounds, that type of stuff. Again, Zack Sabre territory basically. And I went there because I always wanted to go there. I was always interested. Karawi always talked to me about that place, and I was like, you always used to tell me you need to go there, you need to go there. And they basically flew me in, and I wrestled on my first night James Mason, who basically is a UK wrestling icon and was even like one of the coaches at the European WWE Performance Center. So I wrestled him. We went 30 minutes in a traditional British rounds match. And at the end of the match, like I came in as like this like arrogant Frenchman, who was, the evil foreigner type stuff. And at the end of the match, like the people actually applauded me and asked the promoter for me to come back.
Won them
And
over.
that, yeah, I was
That's
like, that
amazing.
never happens. Like, that was surreal.
No, I mean, that's you. That's just how it is. Like it
Yeah.
happens like that. Those moments are few and far between normally. So when they happen, you gotta. That's why I say reflect back on them. And to know that
Yeah.
was just a handful of months ago. There's many more to come. Those are just those right now that are on the forefront.
Sure.
When you started doing your international stuff, man, like I mean, where are some of the countries that you've been to, and some of the things that you've done there? Like, I mean, obviously you said ask yourself 15 years ago if this would be a thing. You'd said hell no. In the moment, though, when these ducks are starting to fall in line and it's starting to move, this train's moving.
Yeah.
How are you feeling, and what were some of your fondest moments of the international tours?
Well, every country is different in like the way you perceive it. Like I said, Mexico, I enjoyed it because it's such an incredible place for a wrestler. It's so part of the culture that it's like phenomenal to get there. The UK, I always wanted to get there because of my style, since I'm more of a technician. I always enjoyed like going there, and winning them over was so surreal. And I was there like 10 days ago, literally. So it's a place that
Amazing.
wrestling wise, I can call home, literally. Malta was very unique, wrestling in Malta, because of my family. Like a huge part of my family is from there, so it was a very personal thing for me. Um, Italy was great. Italy was great because it was like basically a friend of mine who recommended me. So there was like it was a great way for me to show my appreciation by having a good match there. What else did I do? Germany, I did Germany like early on, and it was also very cool to get there because it was like I had the chance to see a lot of like wrestlers before they basically exploded onto the scene. So like the show that I was in, I had the chance to watch guys like Carnage, who's now one of the biggest guys in Germany. When I went to Spain and trained there, I had the chance to see Zack Sabre actually when he was very young, when he was like probably 20 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sami Zayn was there as well, like on that show that time, so that was funny as well.
El
So yeah,
Generico.
yeah, Generico was there back in
Yeah.
those days. Most of the guys from Dragon Gate, the Young Bucks were there at the time. Belgium was interesting because I also had the chance to train with guys like Mike DiVecchio, who was just announced today as the part of the next tournament for All Japan.
Nice.
So
Oh wow.
Yeah, so every country had like a special memory for me, whether it was experience, whether it's seeing people who made it into the big leagues, or just a personal emotional moment.
Goth, what do you got?
That's well. I'm just sinking in all of these names and all of these promotions, like having Malta having a wrestling situation. I know from Italy because I've been watching some. I see Italian Championship Wrestling, I believe.
Yeah.
They have been putting on some good shows, so it's great to see that so many different European countries and organizations are just flourishing under the independent umbrella. What is there one European country that you feel like that, because you based all on it already, like England feeling like home, but is there like a European country that you haven't been to, or and there, besides England, for instance, is there one European country that you love to go to the most?
Um, I think that from like a pure wrestling standpoint, I would love to go to Ireland because a lot of
Okay.
things are happening there, and I'm interested about this. And for more strange reason, I would say I would love to go to I love the smaller countries for some reason because it's like I don't know. It's interesting to like people who live in a microscopic country and they still want to start a wrestling promotion there. I think it's like it really makes you understand that wrestling is everywhere when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, not too long ago, I talked to a guy from San Marino, and I don't even know if like you guys know where this country is.
Yeah, I know, I know. This it's a small state
Yeah,
between
it's like this.
Spain and France, I believe. Oh no,
That's
Italy. No,
yeah, that's
no.
Andorra is between France
Yeah,
and
Andorra.
Spain, and
Got those two movies.
Yeah, and San Marino is basically like this enclave in the middle of Italy.
Yeah.
And there's a guy there who literally started a promotion, and I was like, I want to have this on my list. Like, just for the sake
You,
of saying that I went there, like that's
just,
one of the
just,
things I would
just,
love to do.
just so when someone says where, you can tell them where. Oh, let's get the map out. Let me show you. You see this little blip right here?
Exactly.
Like, that's it. Don't believe me? Here
Exactly.
you go.
It's just like what they say. The Netherlands. Yeah, that's the capital of Denmark, right? And when you're talking about Amsterdam, oh yeah, we know that. For some strange reason, yeah.
What are some of
Exactly.
your some future goals for you? Like what are you looking to accomplish here? Let's say next 5 years. What's something that's on your list to do, or anyone out there that you want to get into the ring with, or projects that you might be working on, or anything like your next your next chapter, if you will. What are you looking to lay down?
It's funny because like I would say after COVID, like I came back and it was like nice. It was like okay, enjoyable. But I was like, yeah, you're over 30, and I think you're getting to the end now. Like, there's nothing
Oh,
too special that is gonna happen.
Oh please.
child. Come on.
Thanks.
And so I had started back in those days to do like different stuff. Like I joined like an MMA school when I was like training grappling with a lot of those guys. And I was like, yeah, you're gonna move on to like another sport and stuff. And around that time, I got more bookings than ever. Like I went to England, then I went to Italy and all this. I was like, oh shit, I guess now I still have, I still have a little bit of time in me. And so now I'm really excited about the future. Like I'm thinking, the next 2 or 3 years are going to be special. I really
I
believe this. So
they
the
are.
immediate goal was, Mhm.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No, I was about to jump in. Go ahead.
The immediate goal would be to go back to England as much as humanly possible, like a ridiculous amount of time, because they get it, like the way that I wrestle, they really understand it, they embrace it, they enjoy it, they respect it. So I really want to wrestle like in premier promotions as much as humanly possible and other British companies. Like I would love to wrestle a guy like Jordan Breaks, like. he's basically like, if you're not familiar with him, like he's a little bit like Zack Sabre or James Mason. He's one of those like great British technicians, old school, but like very interesting and very intelligent, very scientific the way he wrestles. I would love to have like a 6 or 7 rounds match against him. That would be perfect. And of course, the one of the biggest goals of mine would be Japan. If I can get to Japan once, I could just like retire after this and be happy with myself. Like I could just stop everything and maybe open a school or something. Like Japan is the number one goal by a clear mile. This is the thing I want.
Well, I know some
Well,
people that know some people, so I'll put you in touch with some people to make Japan probably happen for
Sure.
you. I want to go back to something just a second because you're talking about going back to the UK. Well, what promotions are you looking for out there? Like, I mean, we talked to you brought up Progress earlier. We have a fantastic relationship
Yeah.
with Progress. Fantastic relationship with North Wrestling. Slam
Mm-hmm.
Masters, which is in Cardiff in South Wales. Like we've got really good contacts with people just by this platform alone. What are some of the companies you want to work for?
Well, the ones you mentioned,
Okay.
they're excellent. They're an excellent product. Ref Pro, I think, like because of the partnership with New Japan, they're just an amazing wrestling company as well.
Mm-hmm.
Love the way they produce their shows. I would love to go to also WAW because like that's Saraya's promotion. So that would be like a very personal thing for me, obviously, to go there. But yeah, like Progress, obviously, Progress is such a great company. Like, it's not even funny. The quality of their shows is just bar none. I would love also to go to like Mega Slam. They're basically the guys who run all the tours, that All Star Wrestling used to have,
Mm-hmm.
and they're basically like the next generation of like great touring promoters. And so just to say that I worked that kind of tour would be great. Work on this. But yeah, top of the list would be like in terms of companies that I never worked for, WAW, RevPro, and Progress, of course.
Well, yeah, we can we can make some. I can get you in touch with some
we
people.
could, we could drop a
It's
link.
funny you said WAW, and a great friend of our channel is a long time WAW fan and is at ringside for all of their events and knows quite a few people there. And we'll actually be talking to
Mm-hmm.
him. And I'm not talking to him. We have a stream in a couple hours that he'll be on. So I'm going to be sure to mention that to see what we can do because I think that it's fantastic to see that you've reinvigorated yourself off of
Yeah,
the last little run uh, and now that the sky is truly the limit. I think that's a beautiful thing to see, and the passion that's there. And I do think that you're going to thrive in the UK because of your style. The way that you wrestle,
yeah,
and something that I do want to touch on and talk about real quick is I literally the day that Goth just sent me a DM and had we literally just watched one of your matches and I from what I saw, and it was about a 12-minute match, and it was really fucking solid. It's one of it was up there. I think we had talked about it as being one of the better matches that when we
Yeah.
were comparing everything on the show. The first 10 minutes of that match was my favorite. The first 10 minutes of any match that was on the show that we watched. It was because of the technician, the chaining, the transitioning, the technical wrestling style. What was something that turned you on to making that your bread and butter, if you will, because I mean, again, and I'm not gonna pretend to bullshit you. I've seen one match. That's the match that I saw. I'm gonna do a spotlight where where I watch a lot more of your matches. Watch 2 hours of them and really dive in and get a feel for the work. But that one match I saw, like it was there. It was top notch. It was really good transitioning and chaining. And again, what made you shift to that style or drive you towards that style? Is it just something that because it's not a Rey Mysterio style? Those were some of the
no,
guys that
that's
we're
for
talking
sure.
about. So I'm just curious, what tempted you over to that side of the rails? Because that's my style. That's the way I used to wrestle, and I have a really firm appreciation for good chaining and good transitioning.
I think it came from the fact that Well, originally, I think Saraya had a huge influence on me since she trained me, and so she was really into the British style. But I think she saw that I was so open-minded that she was like, "Okay, I can teach you all those sequences because you seem to be legitimately interested in those." Because I was like a sponge at the beginning. I was like, "Teach me everything, like everything you want. Like I'll do what I can." And I think that I also always enjoyed like credible wrestling. Like I love high flying, but as I got older, I realized that I really enjoy watching people, like showing people that yeah, what we do is like entertainment. But look at this thing, like if I did this to someone here in the crowd, like you would be screaming in pain. Like that would be legit. And I love the fact that people understand that I work on my stuff. That it's is like it
Mm-hmm.
can be some serious wrestling here. So I think it came from that because as I got older, I got more and more into like grappling and jiu-jitsu and submission wrestling. And I was like, yeah, I think like the way we can make people interested in wrestling again is to make them understand that it can be lethal,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. So that's how I ended up really enjoying like the technical aspect of it. I can throw like a moonsault from time to time whenever I want, but I really love to show people, yeah, look at this armbar, like and now like they're when they see something dangerous, they pay attention. I noticed this, so that's
I,
I got more into the technical aspect.
I you take a good armbar, you take a good wrist lock, and
Yeah,
there's those these little bitty things. This was something I say on the channel. That's the little things. I look for the little. Take a really
Yeah.
good wrist lock, or you take a really good armbar. You you can make someone's you can suspend someone's disbelief that you're gonna break their fucking wrist, and
exactly.
it's
Yeah.
just it's a whole nother level. Don't get me wrong. I love professional. I love all aspects of professional wrestling. I love the lucha. I love it all. Transitioning, chaining, technical, strong style. European strong style is just a
Hmm.
whole different level for me, and and I credit that to Zack Sabre Jr. Because when I first saw him
Oh yeah,
many years ago, I was just like, this is my guy. Where's he been all my life? Then that took me to Daniel Bryan Ring of Honor days because I didn't watch a lot of Ring of
yeah.
Honor, and I went, whoa, hold on. What
Yeah.
what the fuck have I missed, and where have I been? Because I wasn't watching Ring of Honor back in the day.
It also
Yeah.
makes me what you said about when you were trained by Sarai. It makes me think back to the stories that I've also heard about the hard dungeon. How
Yeah,
Stu Hart stretched and made people scream like crazy. And I think back to that Bret Hart documentary also about how you hear somebody scream because of Stu Hart
yeah,
working on them. And it makes me also respect wrestling so much more. That type of wrestling, because I'm also a big fan of uh, Regal. Back in
oh
the
yeah.
day when how he wrestled, and when we watching that match of yours, it made me think back to those days, and I would really appreciative of that.
And I think also it's a great way to complement other types of wrestling. Like
Mm-hmm.
I tell
Yeah,
that to high flyers all the time is that if you mix it in with some technical wrestling, it will make your stuff look even better. Because if you start a match on the ground and then you get on your feet and then you start flying, you build like an anticipation for that. So that's even better. One of the most like underrated pure technicians in the world, and people never think about this guy when they think about technical wrestling, but TJ Perkins
Mm-hmm.
is an
oh yeah,
excellent
oh
technical
Mm-hmm.
wrestler, and he uses it to make his high flying look better
Yep.
yeah,
than everything else.
Fantastic.
That's a great way to use that.
The beautiful thing about the platform that I do and what I really enjoy about doing shows like this, outside of being able to learn more about you and what you've done throughout some of your career, and again, there's still a lot of meat left on the bone here. By any means, there's a lot to unpack. One of the things that I highlight is I always ask guys the same question, guys and gals that come on the show. Ask them one question that's always the same, and I'm going to tell you why I ask you that question after you give me your answer. If you had like 4 or 5 names on the independent scene in France right now that that you would recommend someone take a look at, who would they be?
The big guy, well, the big guy, figuratively, the big guy right now in the country is Aigle Blanc, the White Eagle. He is an incredible talent. He is like a world class high flyer, like legitimately a world class high flyer. He's so special. I'm a big fan of him. Um, Another guy that I would put in the mix would be George Balzac. He's like an old school strongman type wrestler, but it's not like an old school guy as like in a parody.
Mm-hmm.
He's legitimately old school and he's very tough, ridiculously tough. And we talked about the credibility, the importance of being legit.
Mm-hmm.
He's legit. He's as legit as it comes. He has a partner called Gustave Lebrun, who's pretty much like him, but like a more of a cruiserweight in terms of like his frame. Um, Another guy that I would put in the mix would probably be a young guy from the south, because I have to give some love, to the southern boys. A guy called Drix, Drix. He's basically the guy that you could put him in the ring with anybody, and it's going to be a decent match. Like he has this ability to work with literally everybody, and that's phenomenal. He can move. He moves well. He sells well. He adapts to pretty much every style. So he's like the ideal candidate for a wrestling promoter, essentially. And the last guy I would put on the list would be, I would probably put Saito, and he has a Japanese name, but he's actually a French guy, and he's basically a great. He's a great all-rounder, but he's also a great character. He has this like cult leader character going, but it's very subtle. It's very enticing the way like he does it, and I think he has such a bright future. So that would be the fourth. That would be that would be Aigle Blanc, Balzac, Gustave, Drix, and Saito.
Okay, well, perfect. Because I mean, again, why I do this and why I ask this question is because I don't know a whole lot about the French market. You just gave me 4 people to go look at, but reality is you didn't give me 4 people. You gave me at least 8, because they're going to be in the ring with people who I've never seen before. So you would expose me to 8 different people at one time, and that's what I love about professional wrestling. Is because there's so much good out there. Not one person can see it all. But if you pass the word along, the people who want to go out of their way to see it will go out of their way to see it. And I, for one, will be going out of my way to not only see them, but to see a lot more of you as well, because I'm very interested. This came together super quick. I mean, within a matter of a week. From the time we watched the show to setting this up, you were traveling and came in, and we managed to knock this out. And side note, guys, I was late for this. I actually, got my times messed up. So that's on me. I just want everybody to know that I'm not perfect just because it's a taped show. I say that because we do most of our stuff live. So I can't fuck up live. Or if I do, I'm live. It doesn't matter. But if it's taped, there's no excuse. Moving forward, I know you said you want to do some international travel, and Japan's the big goal. And you want to get there. I definitely want to put you in touch with a couple of people who might be able to help you out with that. And we'll do that here in just a few minutes. I'll shoot you some DMs. But if you have anything you want to say to our people that are maybe watching this, or if you got anything you want to plug, anything that you got coming up that you want to get the word out about?
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, thank you, Chris, for having me on the show. I really enjoyed it. So it was really good to be here. If people want to reach me, most of my social media, like Instagram, Twitter, it's like Kick Submissions. And I guess it should tell you everything you you should know about my style when you have a handle name like this.
Yeah, that's great. I love you for
Yeah.
for the fact that you kept it simple. You kept it the same on both forms of social media, Instagram and X. It's Kick Submissions. It's been on the screen right there underneath him the whole time, guys. Also, is if you want to go over there and support him with some merch sales, Hexagon Catch at .bigcartel.com. Super simple to do. What projects you got coming up?
Absolutely. Well, hopefully, if everything goes well in a few days, the latest match from Premier Promotions is going to be uploaded, I hope. So, a British rounds match, something very different, I
Okay.
think, for the audience, but
Let's
very
go.
enjoyable nonetheless. We're also working on like a European wrestling platform that is already online called catchplus.eu.
Okay.
It's a very interesting, it's a Netflix type network, but there's only European indie wrestling. So it's a
Nice.
very interesting project. It's cheap, quite cheap. It's like less than $5 a month, and
We'll
you
link
have
it.
access to a catalog of like a dozen wrestling promotions. So a little bit of French, a little bit of Spanish, some Northern Irish, a little bit of everything. So these are the projects that I'm
You're,
working on, and
you're
and
speaking
I'm
my, you're
also gonna
speaking my
have
language. If you tell me that I can go
exactly.
spend less than $5 and I get access to 12 feds that I've never seen before, yeah, that link will be down below, guys. You should probably check that out as
Yeah,
well. Go ahead. Didn't mean to step
yeah.
on you.
And it's a great endeavor. Like I talked to the guy who runs it, and it's funny because it's literally like a non-profit as well. Like he literally takes zero money from that. Every time you watch something on the platform, it's the watch time is like calculated, and the money goes back to the promotions. So it's a great way to support like indie wrestling
Even
groups.
better.
So
If you didn't
yeah,
sell me on the price being less than $5, you just sold me on the fact that if I watch your show, the proceeds that have generated from that watch time going back to that company, yeah, that's a no-brainer. We're gonna link that one. That'll be down below, guys.
yeah, and so yeah, like I'm gonna be wrestling a lot more in France in the upcoming weeks. So there's going to be some HPW in the Southwest, some TPW, which you have watched. And I'm also planning to basically go back to England, like hopefully like this summer. That would be perfect. So I'm very
Yes.
active on social media. So if anybody has questions, I'm always answering. Always.
Man, I appreciate it. I know that there's a time difference with us, obviously, being on other sides of the world. It was so much fun to sit down and talk to you for a little bit here this afternoon. I did leave a lot on the bone intentionally because I always leave the door open for any other shows. If you want to come back on, if you want to do a live stream with
Sure.
us on Twitch, if you want to ever come back and chat with us, our door is always open. I tell you, like I tell everybody, if we do a project with you, something like this, like we're around, we're right here. If you need anything, if there's anything we can do for you, all you got to do is ask. And if it's within our power, we're gonna do it. If it's if it's watching your matches, if it's watching your shows, if you have companies that you want to turn us on to, bring them. The more, the merrier. We will get to everybody. I love what we do. I love the contacts that we've made, and I love professional wrestling. And I appreciate your time this afternoon.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, not a problem, man. We appreciate you. And if you guys, if you have not done so, again, it's been underneath his name, underneath his face the entire time, right there on the screen. It's hexcatch.bigcartel.com. Sorry, hexcatch.bigcartel.com. Social media is Kick Submissions. Zaeken, it's been a pleasure. If guys, gals, we'll see you next time.